Welcome to the session all about the portfolio diet. Now, if you haven't heard about this way of eating, you're in for a treat. It's a way of eating to help lower your cholesterol levels. And it's relatively new, so a lot of individuals don't think of this immediately when they're thinking about heart health. But if that is one of your heart health goals, is to lower your cholesterol, this is the way to eat. But before I jump into the education, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about where you're at now. What's your baseline? And it's not for me to judge you, it's just to collect information. We have to have some awareness of where we are and then learn where we want to go. And then we want to make some kind of an action plan to join the two. So let's start off with where we're at and how much of these foods we're eating. So this portfolio diet is a diet that focuses on including specific heart protective foods, and the foods are below. So if you have a pen or paper, take it out and write it down if you can. Probably take a minute, but just think about last week. Did you include any nuts or seeds in your eating pattern? And if so, how much? So this could be anything from, peanuts to almonds or cashews. It could be seeds like pumpkin seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, flax seeds. It could be nut butters, sunflower butter, peanut butter, any of those. But just thinking how often you have them and how much. Now the next bullet is about how much vegetables, fruits, and whole grains you have. So you could actually probably just take just yesterday as an example and think about how many vegetables, fruits, and grain products you had, but specifically how many of those grain products were whole grains. So if you can take a minute to do that, you can just go through each of your meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks, and kind of just make check marks beside it. Then we're thinking about plant protein. So that's protein coming from plant foods. Those are things like your nuts and seeds. It could be legumes like chickpeas, kidney beans, lentils. It could be plant-based milks like soy milk or oat milk maybe has a little bit. Almond milk has a little bit. What else has quinoa? So some whole grains have plant protein, tofu, veggie burgers, anything like that. And that could be per week, I guess. And then plant sterols. So if you've had plant sterols, write that down. If you don't know what plant sterols are, don't worry. And that's maybe where we can help you learn a little bit more about what those are and the benefits, and maybe start including them more often. So I'm going to let you pause the video and assess where you're at now as a baseline, and take that time to really evaluate so that you know where you're at, so you can form a realistic plan to move ahead and lower your cholesterol with these heart protective foods. So the research behind the portfolio diet is pretty strong. It's a more recent diet, but it's from a doctor from Toronto, from St. Mike's Hospital. His name is Dr. Jenkins. He was actually responsible for the glycemic index as well, and that was established years ago. But this is a little bit more new. And what he kind of came up with was he was looking at foods that help lower cholesterol levels. And then he grouped these heart protective foods together into this portfolio diet and studied it against individuals who were not eating the portfolio diet, and then individuals who were eating these specific foods. And it did help to lower their cholesterol. So we know that there's different types of cholesterol in our blood, and one of them is the LDL, or the low density lipoprotein cholesterol. That's the one that we really want to get down to help prevent cardiac events and cardiovascular disease. And that is the one that can be reduced by this portfolio diet. And on average, the results were that individuals were able to reduce their LDL cholesterol by about 20 to 30% in about 4 weeks' time, which is pretty significant. When you actually compare that to a statin, statins are a medication that are often recommended to lower your LDL cholesterol. Dr. Jenkins did a research trial to compare the two, and he did show that the statin medications also do reduce your LDL cholesterol levels by about 33%, and the diet, this portfolio diet, is about, up to 30% reduction of LDL cholesterol. So both are pretty significant, and it does show the power of food and what it can also do to help lower your cholesterol levels. The portfolio diet research also shows some other benefits. It helps reduce cardiovascular disease risk. It helps to reduce your total cholesterol levels, could manage your blood pressure, reduce triglyceride levels, and your C-reactive protein. So lots of really beneficial markers that are being managed that do help with our heart health. So let's jump into what this diet is. It is split up into 4 pillars, I like to say. It's like a portfolio, so 4 pieces of the portfolio diet, but the pillars are here. So we'll go through each pillar one at a time. The first one is about nuts and seeds. The second one is something called soluble fiber. The third is plant protein. And then the fourth is plant sterols. So this is a picture here of your arteries, and that yellow stuff is that plaque, right? So the plaque builds up on your arteries, and then the blood has a harder time to push through. And then if there's ever that blockage, that's when it would cause maybe a heart attack or stroke, depending on where that blockage is. So let's talk about the foods that can really help our heart health. And the first pillar is those nuts and seeds. So the original portfolio diet was studied with adding nuts, about 45 grams of nuts every day to your eating pattern. Nuts are a wonderful source of healthy, unsaturated fats, and those are types of fats like olive oil. And we know in the Mediterranean way of eating that olive oil can really reduce our LDL cholesterol. And so nuts also are a powerful source of these unsaturated fats and antioxidants that can help lower cholesterol too. It helps with weight maintenance. So a lot of individuals are a little wary of this recommendation when I first present it, because they say, hey, Veronica, those are really high in calories. I know I'm supposed to lose weight, and I don't think eating nuts will help do that. And that's not necessarily the case. A lot of research does show that eating nuts every day can actually help you lose weight. And that goes down to weight management science, and it's not all about calories in and calories out. I think back in the day, we did think, lower calories is what we wanted to do to lose weight. And that's where a lot of the diets came into play. But the newer research is suggesting, adding the healthy fats and protein are really important to help keep us satiated and full. And so including nuts, in your breakfast, perhaps, or as a snack can be more nutritious. And it helps keep us full longer so we don't end up snacking on less nutrient dense foods. And then, just because it was studied with nuts, it doesn't mean that nut butter can't be used instead. And then if you are allergic to nuts, you can always try seeds as well, or you don't like nuts for any reason. Seeds are a wonderful substitution. They're very similar profile to nuts. So 45 grams a day is about a third of a cup of nuts. And if you're, trying to manage your blood pressure too, we do want to try to have the unsalted versions to help to reduce that overall salt intake. But this is overall pretty generally easy recommendation for a lot of my clients. And, nuts and seeds are tasty. It's just a matter of actually doing it every day. So thinking about a strategy, how you can start to include these every day. And a common one that I brainstorm with my clients a lot, and a common one that seems effective for most people is adding them to your breakfast. So if you add a third of a cup of nuts to your breakfast, you kind of can tick that recommendation off in the morning every day, so you don't have to think about it anymore. And commonly, our breakfast is low in those healthy fats and protein. So if you think about cereals, often we have, that's a grain product in milk, but there's not a lot of healthy fats or protein. So adding these nuts and seeds there can really help boost the overall nutrition of that meal, make it a little bit more balanced, more satiating, as well as help to lower your cholesterol levels. So that's just a thought, but think about ways to do that. I guess I'll just throw out one other way. It's actually portioning out 1/3 of a cup of your nuts or seeds for the week and into little containers. So it could be little Ziploc bags or Tupperware, whatever you want to do. But, you set out 7 for the week, and then you know that each day you have to pull one out and consume it. And usually, you could do that for a snack or throw it on your salad or however you'd like to consume it. But if you have it spread out for the week, then you know that, you have to do something each day, and the days that you maybe didn't execute that recommendation. The other kind of benefit to that suggestion is that they're pre-portioned. So, nuts and seeds are tasty, and it's really easy to overeat them. So eating them or pre-portioning them, I guess, helps you not have that bag available and that you kind of double dip or keep eating out of that bag. You know that you have the 1/3 of a cup, and that's all you need. Okay, so moving on. The next pillar is called soluble fiber. So a lot of the time, when we talk about fiber, we think about fiber being a nutrient that helps keep us regular, right? Helps with our digestion, helps us go to the washroom. But there's in fact two types of fiber in our system. One is insoluble fiber, and that's the one that keeps us regular. That's the one we're familiar with. And, that's like our bran and our grain products. The other type is this soluble fiber, and it's, not talked about as much, but so beneficial. And soluble fiber is like a fiber. When we eat it, it kind of thickens up the stool, I guess. And so it's going through a system and it's kind of collecting extra things, and the stool makes it a little bit thicker. It helps to collect water too, which makes it a little bit thicker as well. But the most important part about soluble fiber is that it can actually bind with something called bile. And so bile in our body, when we look at the chemical structure, it's actually made up of a cholesterol molecule. So soluble fiber binds with bile, and then we excrete it when we're going to the washroom. So we're actually excreting cholesterol molecules, which is pretty cool. So instead of the bile, being reabsorbed and recirculated or being deposited places that we don't want it to be, or broken down into those cholesterol molecules, it is actually excreted, and then our body has to find other cholesterol molecules to make more bile in our body to help us digest fat. So that is how it can help lower cholesterol levels. This diet, the portfolio diet, recommends eating 20 grams of soluble fiber a day. Now, you really need to pay attention to the foods that you're eating to get the 20 grams a day. It is challenging, especially at first, but once you realize what types of foods have the soluble fiber, it's easier to include more often. So, typical plant foods have fiber, so our fruits, our vegetables, legumes, as well as whole grains. Whole grains like oats, oat bran, barley, those are some good sources. So, oatmeal in the morning this has been a recommendation to help lower your cholesterol, and that's because of the soluble fiber. And then when you're also increasing your fiber intake, you always want to increase your water intake or your fluid intake, unless you're on a fluid restriction, maybe for heart failure. But otherwise, you want to increase the fluid to help move that fiber through. Because if you're having a very low fiber diet and then you go from 0 to 100, it's going to be very uncomfortable. You may have some bloating, some gas, and some uncomfortable side effects. If that's the case, you may be turned off of this, recommendation of adding more fiber. And it's just a matter of your body getting used to the additional fiber, and a way to help get used to it, move it through, so that you can prevent some of these uncomfortable side effects is to just eat a little bit at a time. So if you're starting at 0, maybe your goal for next week is 5 grams, and then the goal for the next week is 10 grams, and you're slowly increasing that number. So you're spreading it out throughout the day could be another thing. Adding more fluid is another recommendation, and also physical activity can help move things through. So those are some suggestions to help reduce some of those side effects of maybe increasing that soluble fiber. But yeah, 20 grams of soluble fiber can reduce your LDL cholesterol by about 5 to 10%. So that's a really great strategy. The next pillar of this portfolio diet is plant protein. So the original portfolio diet was studied with consuming a specific amount of soy protein. And so that would be things like soy milk, tofu. It could be like processed tofu as well, maybe like tofu burgers, things like that. Edamame's up there. That would be, it's a baby soybean, another form of soy protein. But subsequent studies, research studies, have tried to mimic the portfolio diet with including just generally plant protein instead of specifically that soy protein. And it has shown similar results, that including 45 grams of plant protein a day can reduce your LDL cholesterol by about 5 to 10%. So pretty significant. It can do it in a variety of ways. One being that plant protein, if you notice in the last slide, it is a form of that soluble fiber. So that could be a way that it's reducing your LDL. It has some of those healthy unsaturated fats, just like those nuts and seeds. So that's another reason why it could help reduce your LDL cholesterol. Often the time when we're eating plant protein, we're eating less animal protein. And animal protein has a type of fat called saturated fat, and too much saturated fat can actually increase our LDL cholesterol. So by kind of swapping the plant protein or swapping out the animal protein with plant protein, that can be a way to help reduce the LDL cholesterol by just reducing your saturated fat. So 45 grams of plant protein a day, mainly 2 of your meals should be plant-based protein if possible. And that could be things like those legumes, chickpeas, kidney beans, lentils, black beans, soybeans. It could be your nuts and seeds are also considered the forms of plant-based protein. Soy milk is a really good replacement. Tofu, lots of options there. As a bonus too, the plant protein can also raise your good cholesterol, your HDL, your high density lipoprotein cholesterol, also known as your healthy H is for healthy cholesterol. So another bonus. And then we have their final pillar of this portfolio diet, which is called plant sterols. Now, plant sterols are naturally found in plant foods. So eating more of these foods that we've been talking about, you are going to be naturally increasing your plant sterols in a day. And plant sterols are so beneficial because they are in the shape, like when we digest them, and the molecule itself is in the shape of a cholesterol molecule. So it's a very similar shape. So when it goes in our system, it can actually bind with a cholesterol receptor because it's the same shape as cholesterol. So that when cholesterol is moving through, it can't bind because the receptor is being occupied by this plant sterol. And then so it continues to move through our body, maybe being recycled instead of being absorbed into our bloodstream. Or a system. So that's the way that it helps to reduce our cholesterol levels or our LDL cholesterol. Unfortunately, I guess, is that the plant sterol amount that we need in a day to help block that absorption of cholesterol and prevent the cholesterol from entering the bloodstream is about 2 grams in a day. And I'd say eating like a diet that has a lot of plant foods would probably provide about 0.5 grams of plant sterols in a day. I think one of the stats I always remember is eating 50 apples in a day would provide you with 2 grams of plant sterols. So it's very unrealistic to consume that amount through plant food. And that's why there's some foods that are fortified with plant sterols. So you can choose some of these foods to eat that are fortified, and those are kind of displayed here. There's an orange juice on the market, there's a margarine, there's some yogurts right now, but some are being, more are being made, I guess, as we speak. So you could choose that route. Or the other option is to purchase a plant sterol supplement. And usually that is recommended to take at each meal. And it helps, again, to block that cholesterol absorption into the bloodstream. So it's kind of spaced out throughout the day, and usually the dose is around 1.5 grams of the supplement. And like I said, the other part of your food intake is probably around 0.5 grams of plant sterol. So you get to that 2 grams a day with the help of supplements. Not a lot of side effects that I've ever read about supplements, but always checking with your pharmacist or your doctor is always a good thing to just get the go ahead to start consuming this. So thinking about those easy swaps or substitutions is a great way to start incorporating this portfolio diet. So something like, instead of using butter, maybe using a plant sterol fortified margarine. Maybe that's when you use your nut butter and getting your nuts for the day. So you could do that. An easy swap is swapping out cow's milk for soy milk, because they have the same amount of protein, but you're getting the protein from plants through the soy milk. Other plant-based milks like almond milk and oat milk don't really have the same amount of protein, so it's not the best swap, and I do really recommend that unsweetened soy milk. If you're having barbecues outside and you're used to the beef patties, maybe trying a veggie or soy patty to up that plant protein. Ground meat, you can substitute, some tofu or tempeh. Tempeh is something that you can crumble up, and it has the same texture as ground meat. Another thing I do with ground meat is actually just cut the ground meat in half, and I put in half lentils. So another kind of way to reduce the amount of animal meat, increase your plant protein, and to still get that taste that maybe you're used to. So those are the options there. And then I have a meal plan of 3 days worth of meal plans to just think about how you can start including these things more often. For breakfast here, I have an overnight oat or oat bran in the morning, because that will help with that soluble fiber from the oats, and some fruit as well. It has some plant protein in it with the nut butter and the nuts, and it could have plant sterols in it if, I guess naturally occurring plant sterols in it. Then at lunch, we could have something like a tofu scramble. So if you love scrambled eggs, I really encourage you to try tofu scramble. Tofu is easy to, scramble up. It just crumbles, I guess, and then it doesn't taste like much tofu. So you add the flavoring through different spices, and that can be a great easy meal that comes together pretty quickly. You add some maybe that spinach or some peppers to it to make it like a nice scrambled egg. Put it on some whole grains and you have a really nice meal. Dinner, a lentil burrito could be an option. Again, you could do the half ground beet, half lentil mix if you wanted to try that. And then thinking about your snacks too, a flaxseed pudding is a great way to incorporate some soy protein from the milk. And then flaxseed is, a seed product, so getting some plant protein there. And flaxseed is also a great form of soluble fiber as well. Those are some ideas. Another day could be peanut butter avocado toast. Avocado is an excellent source of soluble fiber. And if you mash that up with any type of nut butter, then you're getting the nuts and the healthy fats from the nuts, as well as the plant protein from the nuts. And it makes it really spreadable. Like tofu, avocado doesn't taste like much. So adding some of that nut protein or that nut butter can add some flavor as well. Lunch, you could have a salad with some chickpeas. So adding some of those plant-based legumes to your dish can really help add plant protein and soluble fiber there. And maybe add it with some quinoa perhaps for some whole grains and more plant protein. Dinner could be a tempeh lettuce wrap. That sounds lovely, doesn't it? Maybe marinate the tempeh like you would any type of meat. Add some veggies to it and pair it with a whole grain. And then snack, I have a great snack recipe, lentil muffin recipe on my website, theheartdietitian.com. Really encourage you to check that out. Actually, any of these underlined meals, I guess, are recipes from my website. So go and check that out if any kind of interest you in any way. But lentil muffin, really easy to make, adding some lentils to the dish to reduce some of that butter and saturated fat, but add some soluble fiber and plant-based protein in the meantime. So it's all about just these little tiny shifts can really help to meet those goals of the portfolio diet. And finally, the last day, making something called tofu toast. So that's similar to the peanut butter and avocado, but you're mixing the tofu with avocado instead. So you're getting the plant protein and then the nice soluble fiber from the avocado, putting it on some whole grains. So that's lovely. Lunch could be the tomato oatmeal soup. So oats are a really great source of the soluble fiber. So yes, you can add it to your oats as a nice whole grain. So try that out. And dinner could be a nice stir fry. And typically when we're thinking of stir fries, we think of meat stir fries, but maybe substituting the meat for some tofu or tempeh, keeping with the veggies that you like and throwing it over some brown rice would be awesome. And then I have some really great smoothies on my website about adding beans to your smoothies. So something that you don't really notice that much. They're in smaller amounts, but you're still getting the plant protein from it, the soluble fiber, a lot of the nutrients, and it's in kind of a delicious way to do that. So check that out if that sounds interesting to you. So that's the portfolio diet. And, there's this great checklist that I created here, and it's just the 4 different pillars of that portfolio diet. It tells you how many grams in a day that you need, and then you just simply tick it off each day to kind of get in the habit of prioritizing those heart healthy foods to really strengthen your heart. So that could be something that you do on a daily basis if it's what you want to do. Or the other thing is just taking one of those food groupings at a time and trying to do that more often. And once you can, the majority of the week, you're actually putting that check mark in the box, then maybe moving on to the second food grouping would be a nice plan. So it's not too overwhelming, but you're doing one step at a time. So think about now, looking back at your the very first slide we had when we assessed our diet and how much we were eating. So think about what you wrote down and then think about what I recommended. And is there a gap? And if there is, which one of those gaps do you want to tackle first? So just choose one for now. Is it the nuts and seeds, the soluble fiber, the plant protein, the plant sterols? Pick one. And then let's make an action plan. So how are you going to increase that every day this week? So like I mentioned, a few recommendations about the nuts in the mornings, perhaps. Soluble fiber could be easily adding something like avocado every day. If that's something you like, you can buy frozen avocado now, add it to your smoothies, or a nice spread, maybe guacamole. Plant protein, maybe it's just trying some of these new vegetarian vegan dishes, and that's what you want to focus on this week. Maybe it's replacing some of that animal meat with some of the legumes that I mentioned. Lentils are a great one to kind of do half and half, ground beef and meat, and just to start incorporating these a little bit more often. Or maybe it's just looking into getting a plant sterile supplement, talking to your pharmacist if there's any interactions, and just, starting to tick these things off on a daily basis. So I hope that was helpful to give you some practical suggestions to help to incorporate this portfolio diet into your everyday living. And if you have any questions, please reach out.